We were just listening to the tail end of Cowboys head coach Brian Schottenheimer's press conference, his first press conference since the NFL draft, as the Cowboys are underway with OTAs up at the Star in Frisco. They have been now for a few days now, but today's the first day where the media is allowed to come in and ask some questions and break down what's happening thus far. Some really interesting thoughts from the Cowboys head coach, who is one of the more introspective and thoughtful coaches around the league. He often has sound bites that make us go, huh. Hadn't thought about it that way, and there were a couple of those this morning.
As there usually are.
Yeah.
Good on us, though, for predicting at least the top two topics right out of the gate. The first two topics.
We're going to Vegas, baby.
Yeah. I mean, these ones were pretty right there for the taking.
Yeah, they were pretty
George
obvious.
Pickens and Caleb Downs, obviously the two things that he addressed first. But as Mike said, yeah, I mean, I thought there was a lot there. And we'll get into it. We'll hear a little bit from him himself. But I think my favorite thing about him that was unsolicited at first was his reflection on year one. You could tell he really took time to evaluate his own performance as a first-time head coach in the NFL. And he is trying to make good on the things that didn't go right. I mean, he flat out said, look, year one didn't work for anyone. And it wasn't just because of the defense. It was for a number of different reasons. And you're even in the first time hearing him talk since, as you said, the NFL draft, like you're seeing some of those evaluations be changed in real time. But I love listening to him, honestly.
Mike, can you do me a favor? Can you tap Andrew's face on the back of his camera and see if we can get his camera?
I'm not focusing. I'm not focusing.
There we go.
We need a sharp, crystal clear
Somehow the
ceiling.
picture got worse.
Oh.
We
Anyway,
were trying to take a couple years off of Andrew's face.
yeah, seriously. I think you put him back on. I think you put him back on, actually. But no, like I think today's press conference is a reminder that as much as the team got criticism last year, the Cowboys got it right in terms of the leader in charge.
Yeah.
Whether it's how he holds court in a press conference, his turns of phrases, his willingness to communicate. And granted, we only get a snippet of it. This is part of his duties and how he interacts with players and whatnot. And I understand there's a lot of pomp and circumstance around changing culture and how much there actually is value in that and how much of this rah-rah stuff actually works on guys that are professionals. But it still seems like this is an extension of they hired the right guy and it's the right guy making the right moves.
I also found it not surprising, but it just instructive, if nothing else, just how chill he seems about the George Pickens thing.
Yes.
He seems unbothered by it because I think he should seem unbothered by it. It is voluntary. Are there things that he's probably missing this week? Sure, and we'll cut that up because he talked a little bit about kind of the nuances of what actually goes into OTAs, what comes out of OTAs, and there are some things that are being missed in all of this, but it is June 4th, and this isn't real football, and it's not the end of the world, and it's not at all unprecedented that a guy who's having something of a contract snafu missed this part of the offseason program. Not a big deal. Not something the Cowboys fans should be terribly concerned about. This is not like the contract issues that we have seen in recent years for this organization. This does feel different. This does feel, it's not a deal at all, but it's less of a deal than a lot of these other things have been.
It just thinks that you say plural, and we just accept it for fact. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
It's an every year thing. It's like, how can we drag this out and keep ourselves in the news cycle a little bit more? That's what it still feels like to me.
And it does feel like they're doing less of that this year. Like, I wonder how much of that is the influence of Brian Schottenheimer. That
is this an extension of us trying to reach for something? Like, I mean, to some degree, no, there is something there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a nothing.
Right.
But it's a much smaller deal than some of the other things that we've seen.
And even just last year, like compare it to June 3rd or whatever, 4th of last year with the Micah Parsons situation. Like that felt like a much bigger ordeal. And obviously it was different circumstances. Micah was not told ahead of time he's playing on the franchise tag. Like there was a very different set of circumstances there. But even still.
But like to Michelle's point, like Shotty brought up Micah unsolicited. Like he kind of not compared it, but like similar situation, and it was the first thing to come to mind. So I found that kind of interesting, just layering that in, knowing how that whole thing transpired. We don't anticipate it transpiring the same way, but you know, the comparison
fresh
does
on
exist.
his mind, and that's as he was going through his first season as head coach, he was dealing with that.
It's a heck of an introduction.
The Dallas Cowboys are fully underway with OTAs, and we did this morning get an opportunity to hear from head coach Brian Schottenheimer about a litany of subjects. The first question we knew all along was going to be relative to George Pickens, and if maybe we can just start with that soundbite, that will be a good place to begin this conversation because, as we talked about off the very top of the show, he was understandably unbothered by this whole situation. And he's right. It is just part of the business. This is pretty status quo for any big-time player that is in any sort of contract squabble, and this one isn't that big a contract squabble, but it is. That's all this is. This is pretty typical standard fare for this time of year.
I will say, I think that maybe flying under the radar a little bit is Brian Schottenheimer's relationship with GP, because I think the fact that they have a really good relationship, that Shotty feels like he can reach out to him, just check on him at any point in time. Like, I'm trying to picture, a Mike McCarthy and a GP relationship under the same set of circumstances. And I just think that Shotty's ability to connect with players and make them feel still part of the team, even though they're not with the team, because it purely is a business dealing going on behind the scenes. I think that probably plays into why he's able to feel so comfortable about it. I don't know if you think that's dumb.
No, it's not. It feels like it's an extension of who he is as a person.
Yeah.
He understands where the fault lines are. He knows how to kind of navigate these things. And again, voluntary is voluntary.
Yeah.
Like it is worth reminding people. Like, as much as I want to critique the front office for putting themselves in this position, it is totally possible that, hey, he was signed to a long-term deal and he wouldn't have shown up anyway. Like that does happen. These voluntary OTAs are precisely that. It's more for people that need it, like rookies or guys that are fighting for roster spots.
Yeah, I haven't specifically clocked this, but it's entirely possible that there are other guys on the roster, whether it's here in Dallas or somewhere else across the league, that aren't in any sort of contract stalemate, that don't show up this week because it is voluntary. They've got something else going on. It's not the end of the world.
I think when you're a star player, the expectation is that you're there, whether it's voluntary or not. And that's why, like, him pointing out, obviously, if Dak's not there, he got bigger issues. Dak wouldn't miss it. But CeeDee Lamb being there, and CeeDee Lamb looking like, I think his quote was that he's jumping out of his cleats, has really impressed him. You're talking about a star wide receiver getting paid and him still being, impressing the head coach. Like, I remember back to playing sports and, you want to be the one that impresses your coach, and it's CeeDee Lamb being the one, even in voluntary OTAs. I think that's where, yes, it's voluntary, but at the same time, I think if GP had a long-term deal and he wasn't there, they would be more surprised by that.
I said this last offseason, and injury kind of upended the apple cart on all of this. And honestly, George Pickens' performance also probably impacted CD's numbers and all. Last offseason, I felt like going into the 2025 season, CD had potential to elevate his game even further to the point where he would be in the conversation for the best wide receiver in the NFL. I do think that's where his ceiling is.
Yeah.
And if that's the way that Brian Schottenheimer is viewing already the beginning of his offseason, if he already feels like he's off to a really strong start to the offseason program, this is a guy that has that kind of ceiling. Now, again, injury kind of derailed that at least a little bit last year, but even despite the injury, still had a strong season statistically. Is this the year where we see CD elevate his game even that step further, where he's already been an all-pro? He's already been in that collection of the 3, 4, 5 best wide receivers in the NFL. Does he perhaps this season insert himself fully in that conversation with the Justin Jeffersons, with the Jamar, whoever your favorite is in the moment? Is CD? Yeah. Oh my goodness! How could I even forget JSN?
The defensive player of the year.
Oh goodness!
I'm sorry.
Gracious.
Continue.
No, but you're right, because that was so bad. But yeah,
that's a good pull.
I don't see why he can't be right there in that discussion, because he is incredibly gifted and is a guy that does, I think, have the type of work ethic that requires. I think he's in store for a big 2026.
I'm curious about the balancing aspect of it, because last year when CD missed his stretch right around week 3 because he got injured against the Bears, Pickens became he's open down there somewhere. Let's make something happen. Throw it up and see what happens. And it worked a lot of the time, right? It's not saying CD can't fill into that role, but once CD came back, then it was a balancing act of getting them both involved.
Right.
Pickens was still the dominant receiver. If Pickens misses extensive time and Dak's creating more of a relationship with CD on the field, does that flip? Does CD get the beneficiary that Pickens did last year, right? And how do you make both of them happy? That's kind of part of the question here, because we know Pickens has some foibles with dealing with getting the ball. That only popped up like once or twice toward the tail end of last year. How much does that carry over? How much does CD become the security blanket? Where do they both fit in? How do they both make each other better? That's all provided that Pickens is available and contributing to the offense.
Yeah. If we can call up SOT 33, because I thought this question from Jane Slater was very interesting relative to, yes, fine, it's normal, it's not the end of the world that George Pickens isn't there for OTAs, but what is he actually missing relative to the relationships with a guy like Caleb Downs, with a guy like Malachi Lawrence, that you're not going to necessarily be relying on those guys on the field playing on the opposite side of the ball, but you do want to have a relationship with. I thought that was interesting perspective on all of that, but I do think that Schotty's also right when he circles around at the back end. It's not like that's going to be impossible to make up. It's not like when they show up at training camp, George Pickens is going to go, who are you again? I'm sure that they've crossed paths. They're still seeing one another.
The point that actually stood out to me was him saying, how do you prove to your teammates that you're doing everything you possibly can to be the best version of yourself if they don't see you doing it? And I think that really could apply to any human in any workplace, or even, if you're not at the age to be working and providing for this family, if you're younger and you're on a team, how do you prove to the people, your peers, your coaches, your bosses, that you're doing everything you can if they're not seeing it? Now, obviously, when it comes time to play the games, and if you're the best receiver on the team, obviously you put in the work. But just, again, another perspective that I guess I hadn't thought about, but that is very understandable and I think telling from Schotty's perspective on what he is noticing and isn't.
I mean, that's part of this, right? This has been his mantra since he got in here. He wants to try and change the culture. And a lot of it, I mean, for better or worse, a lot of the Cowboys culture boils down to viewership, right? That's part of this. They're literally parading people in through the building to come watch them work out occasionally, which has been brought up ad nauseum as a negative around the organization. Yes, but you get your own show, you get your own podcast, you do what you want.
Cheerleaders have their own show,
right? Exactly. It is part of building your own brand. I like that he's internalizing it and basically saying, if we're going to get better, you need to stop looking at external validation and look at internal inside the building validation. And that's an important part of it.
I want Rowdy's show. Can we have a show?
It would be mute.
No, like a kid.
It'd just be sign language.
Like an animated kids show, but starring Rowdy.
Is that Reckham?
Do you know who else knows sign language, Kelly? The kid whose name you didn't know on the Spurs who was washing his hands in the bathroom.
I still don't know his name.
Carter Bryant.
Carter Bryant, yeah.
He knows ASL. Him and Rowdy on a show.
They could have an animated kids show where they teach kids ASL.
There we go.
I'm just saying everybody else gets a show.
Just take some.
I mean, even we have a show and Rowdy doesn't have a show. I'm just saying it's not. I mean.
And poor Rowdy had his number scooped by DeMarvion Overshown.
Rowdy.
If anybody could
poor
take
DeMarvion.
I'm kidding.
I know you are. I know you are. I can be indignant because
the show is now
things that I couldn't possibly care less about.
The show is now a Rowdy Stan account.
Please no.
Maybe we could get him on.
Let's go.
I just pictured it.
Rowdy, how do you feel about the Cowboys season?
Just sitting in the corner with his head down, like the iconic picture that goes around.
I was trying to do a 15-minute interview with Rowdy. I just pictured it. I'm sorry. Where do you want to go,
Now
Mike?
she's crying.
Let's go to SOT 34 because I thought this was interesting relative to Brian Schottenheimer's evaluation of himself and the way that he made his way through year one as a head coach of this organization and some of the changes he wants to make going into year number 2. When I listen to Brian Schottenheimer talk, I hear a leader of men.
Yes.
This is a guy that understands how to connect with his players. This is a guy who understands how to evaluate himself, which if you're going to evaluate everybody on your roster, you have to also be able to and willing to evaluate and critique yourself. And he's showing that ability with everything that he's communicating right now in the early portions of the offseason. This is an organization that has had immense difficulties at succeeding in the postseason, so I'm not remotely going to start pounding the table and say this is a guy who's going to lead them to a Super Bowl. There are too many hurdles within this organization to make that type of leap, but I do think that this is a guy under whom they are going to have success because I think he understands how to get everybody under the tent and pull in the same direction.
I think it's also important to remember, like, this is his first go as a head coach. Like, he had to look himself in the mirror and go, like, I thought that the job was going to be one thing. Here's what actually ended up happening. That's part of his own personal evaluation. So, and it's part of our evaluation of him. It's like we gave him probably, to some degree, the benefit of the doubt on a lot of things because it was his first time tackling a lot of these issues. And he was given a pretty raw deal losing one of his best defensive players right before the start of the season. Yeah. Even then, I felt like, given the trials and tribulations mentally, emotionally, and physically that the team experienced last year, we all gave him pretty high marks. That grace period goes away pretty quick in the NFL if results don't start following. And I imagine they go away quick when your owner is Jerry Jones and the clock is ticking.
Unless you're Jason Garrett.
True.
But no,
well,
there were several
different time circumstance on that too. But yes, you're right.
There were several instances, even in the 20-ish minutes that we listened to him talk, where he pulled on things that he learned from year one going into year two. Another example he gave was, look, last year I think their plan was to do 9 weeks of their installs and basically camp before they go out to training camp in California. He said this year we're going to do 8 weeks. I'm going to change because I felt like, last year we missed that first week. The rookies missed the first week and it just wasn't the type of format that he wanted them to come into. Like, it was example after example. I also loved the example he gave where he said last year, I didn't know what y'all were doing in the press conferences. I didn't realize how fast these things come out. He goes, I thought y'all were hanging on every word I said, taking really good notes. No, you guys are out there tweeting. That's what you're doing. Shout out John Machota, who's always he was
noticing the fact that he's clocking who's fastest with all of that is impressive because he's not wrong when the answer is Machota.
But when you think about it, like, there were so many things that were firsts for him. Figuring out that people are tweeting about him as the words are coming out of his mouth, one example. Figuring out how to better run your off-season program, another example. He went on to say a little bit later on, look, there were so many things that didn't work last year that I had to look in the mirror and start with myself. It wasn't just our defense didn't work. He also was quick to point out, look, I am pretty good at calling plays and I love it. And that did work out for him. So I will be very, very interested to see the leap that they make under him in year two, given that you have a guy who's not only good at looking in the mirror, evaluating himself, but accepting that there are things he doesn't do well and being willing to change them.
We're getting late here, so let's get to the one last topic that we did map out, which is Caleb Downs, the rookie out of Ohio State, because Schotty was complimentary about what he's already seen just in the first. Has it been a month that this guy's been a Cowboy? Little over a month that he's been a Dallas Cowboy. Schotty's already impressed. And what's going to make a coach happier than that? Because he's such a cerebral player. We had the opportunity to talk with his high school coach a month or so ago, and every coach that has had him along the way has talked about, Nick Saban included, has talked about how Caleb Downs' intelligence and understanding of the game is his superpower. And here he is already putting that on display in a very short period of time as a Dallas Cowboy. Sure, making some mistakes, because how are you not going to? You're brand new to professional football. There's going to be mistakes made along the way. But to be able to understand the mistake, digest the coaching, and immediately be able to turn the page to the next thing that you need to learn, his learning curve is going to be very impressive, I think, because his understanding of the game is at a different level.
And you asked earlier, like, could CeeDee Lamb take another step to being the best receiver in the NFL? He's already one of the best, and that's who Caleb Downs is learning against, or practicing against. So you talk about, there are going to be mistakes in professional football. Especially when one of the people that you're going up against, and I know that from his position, whether it's nickel, safety, whatever defensive back spot he's going to occupy is to be determined. And there's a lot more of like big picture offense that comes with that. Still, like physically being matched up potentially against a wide receiver that elite is only going to expedite that learning process.
Imagine CeeDee Lamb and Caleb Downs in one-on-ones at Cowboys camp. How much fun that's going to
already
GP
looking forward to it,
against
man.
Downs. Like that's going to be a ton of fun to watch.
I will say when Schottenheimer was talking about CP, Christian Parker, the new defensive coordinator, the CPGP thing, I was like, that's going to get me. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's pretty much where I was going. I'm just excited to see it. Like I so much of this is, what's the best way to put this? Like anticipatory.
Yeah.
We're seeing what honestly we kind of expected out of him to some degree, given his pedigree. He knows what he's doing. He's gonna try and put himself in the right spot. We just gotta see him do it, and I want to see what it physically looks like on the field with his defense.
We are in an interesting place for the Dallas Cowboys because it was not that long ago that the fan base had grown very apathetic.
Yeah.
And there was little to be excited about from a
Yes.
personnel standpoint.
Yes.
No offense to
And
anyone.
now they have finally kind of turned the worm on that thing because of Brian Schottenheimer's presence, because of Christian Parker's presence, certainly because of the play of the offense last year, even though it didn't directly lead to as many wins as they probably should have had a season ago. The offense was really, really good. And then you add in, okay, now Christian Parker's here. Now Caleb Downs is here. There is a groundswell of excitement behind this team again. And listen, I can just see all of the Eagles and Giants and Commanders fans going, oh, here they go again. They're getting excited again. Like
this is our year.
We're jumping on the cycle again. But on some level, it's good to see Cowboys fans back on the cycle because for a little while they had put the cycle down.
Yeah.
Like there was a period of time where that excitement, even in the offseason when normally it does, hope springs eternal, even then they were like, yeah, I don't buy it.
I'm over
Hope
it.
sprang eternal, and then Myles Garrett became a Ram.